Good morning, everybody. The meeting is convened. Let's start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Will be led by Dale, if you'd kindly lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of prayer, silence, or meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. I'm going to start off this meeting with a quick note. Our last meeting last month was about 3.5 hours long, and we have to be a little more respectful of each other in terms of time, so we're trying to create some efficiencies to get our meetings moving, get decisions made, and get things moving, and do it within a reasonable time frame. I think 2 hours is probably pretty reasonable. So I'm going to ask that we understand what for the public presentations portion of the meeting is for. It's for an opportunity for the public to present an idea for the board that's not on the agenda, and we will do that. And you have opportunities to ask your questions, and you may or may not get answers. We have several of these board members who live in this town, and dialogue and conversation we eagerly embrace, and we want to get out there. At the same time, we want to have you have an opportunity to publicly ask those questions. So we'll do that, but we're not necessarily going to have debate issues or go back and forth during public presentations. We're going to keep that as limited as we can, and we're going to limit speakers to 3 minutes during public presentations, and we'll see how that goes. We're also going to we had a couple of people last time that spoke multiple times about multiple issues, and what we're going to do is limit it to one issue, one time, one bite of the apple, and see if we can get through that, and we'll have an efficient meeting that satisfies the Brown Act and gets everybody moving in the right direction. So thank you very much for your patience, and we'll get this thing moving. Okay, we had a pledge of allegiance, so now it's open for public comments. This time is reserved for members of the public to address the board relative to matters not on the agenda. No action may be taken on non-agenda items unless authorized by law. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Please come on up. Sure, go ahead. Dale, take a minute and explain what we're doing.
What's going on is that I have a time clock, and you have a time clock right there, and it's set to 3 minutes. And so once you start talking,
it looks like 7 here. There's a digit.
That's actually 0, but I'll set it. And you'll get 3 minutes, and you'll have a warning at 1, and then it starts beeping at 3.
I'll try to.
Turn around okay?
I'll try to talk fast. This time I don't normally.
Essentially, the comment that Dale was speaking out of the microphone was 3 minutes per person, and the clock you can watch, and the clock's over here, and she's going to be our guardian of the time.
No, I was trained.
Thank you, Dale. Yes, sir. Please state your name and speak your piece.
My name's Lyle Fisher. I'm a private well owner on Strucker. For those of you unfamiliar with the area, Strucker's located about 5 miles directly west of where I'm standing. Normally I don't say too much, and some of you can attest to that. But there are times that I hear things, I don't hear things, and things concern me, things bother me. And so I've kind of saved up a little list here of things that bother me that I want to talk to you about. One of those items is what I call the naysayers. Those are the ones that still don't believe that we have a water problem here, and this overdraft thing is just merely a big scam, and we need more studies. Well, this isn't helpful to everything, although I think we're gaining on those bunch. But anyhow, for the naysayers, I have a little case in point here. My single data point is called our well. Aaron Kirschman drilled our well in September of 1978. Remember that year for a moment. He told me when he handed me the bid and the proposal for the well, he says, "Lyle, I'm going to give you 100 feet of water." And I go, "Whoa," And then he continued and said, the water table's going down here at about 1.5 feet a year, and that'll provide you water for a good long while. So I did the math on that, and I said, okay, well, it should last me till I'm 85 years old. So That should be more than enough for me. So was Aaron Kirschman a hydrologist or a geologist? I don't think so. He was a well driller. Now, well drillers needed to know that kind of stuff if they wanted to stay in business too long, and he'd been drilling wells a long time when he did ours. So was Aaron Kirschman correct in what he said? Did he know what he was talking about? Well, let me put it this way. Our well has gone down by 50 feet in 30 years. Now, you can do the math on that one. It says I got 8. It's 752. And it still says. Okay, now you got me off the queue, and I got a long
We'll
list.
give you an extra minute, Lyle, but keep going.
Okay.
Keep moving.
Okay. So, what was that year? It was 1978. Aaron Kirschman knew almost 40 years ago that the Indian Wells Valley was in overdraft. Now, a lot of other people knew that too. So why is this such a difficult concept for people to understand? Well, or are they just trying to ignore the problem? I don't know. So is our well going to last until I'm 85? The answer is no, it didn't. And I'm not 85 yet. I got some years to go before I reach that milestone. 3 or 4 years ago, my submersible pump plugged up with rust, flakes of rust. Only been in the well 3 years. Well, this isn't good. This is bad. Did a little more checking and realized that the water table had declined to the point where the perforations in my steel casing were above the water line. Our well was on borrowed time. Well, Kirschman's foreman at the time was able to do a little Band-Aid repair and get us through that summer. Actually, it wasn't a Band-Aid, it was a sock, a really big sock. But that winter, then I got Jerry Boach, well driller from Mojave, came up and deepened our well. Now, anybody thinking about doing that, private well owner, I got to caution a little bit. Deepening a well is not a slam dunk operation. There's about half a dozen things that can go wrong, and if it does, you are in, the only thing they can do is pull their tools out of your old well and drill your new well. So it's not slam dunk. The advice is don't wait too long. Okay. My advice is don't wait too long if you got a steel casing. Now, if you've got a newer well and it's cased in plastic, you better talk to Jerry Boach. The only failure I knew of at the time they did ours was one they tried to do, and it was cased in plastic. And they thought that was the problem. They didn't know for sure, but it didn't work, and they had to drill a new well. Okay, that's my first point. My second point is the things that bother me. Now, here we have the city of Ridgecrest and the water district plowing forward in a business-as-usual mode, ignoring all of this critical overdraft and this coming GSP, not the A, but the P, the plan. And it's really hard problems. This stuff, so far, this stuff is a piece of cake. You know, it's sure everybody thinks it's hard to get it, but we got here. Okay.
30 seconds, Lyle.
Okay. Now, where do I cut that off at? And the water district is getting ready to drill a new well here in the southwest. Now, under their water supply improvement project, you know, this is right in the middle of all this GSA. This is a real public perception problem. And to top that off, I strongly believe this well is unnecessary, and now you're going to make me get down. So, okay. Yeah.
Okay, let me explain one thing, Bill.
Yes, just 7 minutes.
It looks like the 7, but what you told me up there is it's actually the red doesn't go all the way around. So I'm sorry.
I'm not going to take 3 minutes.
3, and you'll have 3 minutes, and then when it gets to where you have less than 1 minute, it's going to look like you have 7, but you don't. Okay?
I'll look at my watch.
All right. Sorry about that.
My name is Bill Manowski. I'm a ratepayer. Mick, last GSA meeting, you said that the state is going to want us to balance the aquifer. So I got a little curious as to what that meant. So I called Tim Ross at DWR. For those of you who don't know, remember who Tim Ross is. He's the head hydrologist for Southern California. Hey, Tim. Glad you showed up. You can confirm this. And basically, is a balanced aquifer, zero decline in the water table. Now, the data shows that the water table has been declining before anybody was even here. And I mentioned to Tim that even if we move everybody out of here, the water table is going to continue to decline. So what's your current plan for getting the water table to stop dropping?
Thank you, sir.
Question.
I got that question, and we're going to address that. Thank you very much. Anybody else? Can I have people raise their hand if they plan on speaking? Because what I would ask you to do is to shift over so we could then sit over here on my left, your right. But I guess we've got 3 more speakers.
Yep. Cool. I'll get this display fixed as soon as I become mayor of Ridgecrest, so we won't have that problem. Anyway, my name's Mike Neal, and back to this board being either appointed or elected. Last night's city council meeting, another problem with that showed its head, and that was the logistics of getting all of you people who are on other boards of who knows how many different ones to all get together and find a common calendar time that you can meet. And lo and behold, here we are, 10 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday morning, when it's exceedingly inconvenient for lots of people to even get here. So once again, I think the problem with this board not being elected is showing itself in practicality of function. And so if this can't be solved, I would just say, well, it's one more reason to move in that direction. The other reason, of course, is, and if you have to think about what Mr. Monosky just said, basically where it looks like the state is pretty much throwing us into an unsolvable problem. They're putting a requirement on that, saying you have to rectify something that was going on even before very many people were here pumping water out of the ground. So it's never going to get there. And then, well, lo and behold, we've been told if you don't get there, the state's going to take it over. Well, in that case, what you need is an elected board of people who are vehemently on the side of the people who will fight the state, just like we did with the wastewater here thing years ago. The council didn't really want to, but they were, we forced it. And guess what? The state said, oh, I guess you don't have to do that after a long fight. So that's what it's going to take, I think, to get people any kind of justice on this water issue, is an elected board who is very dedicated to fighting for the people's rights, and not people appointed from all kinds of regions, people from counties who barely have any people in this basin at all in their population or anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
My name is Larry Pruce from South Owens Valley. What are the boundaries of this organization? Physical boundaries. We have Matt Kingsley here sometimes. He also represents Inyo County on their same board up there. My question is, why are we allowing the coastal project, the Hayfield project? We don't know what the water is going for. I think it's on the base. They have pumped 16,643 acre feet since 2009. They're averaging between 6 and 8 acre feet a day on that water. What are we doing with it? Are we watching this? It's a big project, and it's not going to stop. And is the water going for recharge, as suspicious as it is? That's what they say, for the coastal steam field, and not returning at all on that field at all. The traces that are showing any returns. 16,000 acre feet, a lot of water. 6 acre feet a day is a lot of water. We need to watch what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. 2 good points. I want to refer you to Mr. Parker at the end. What's that gentleman's name? Sir, if you talk to the gentleman at the end of this table with the tie after the meeting, he will update you on Bulletin 118, which outlines and defines the boundaries, geographical boundaries of our water basin, and we're working that other issue. Thank you, sir.
And Matt sends his apologies. He wasn't available for today's meeting. I'm Bob Harrington, the water director for Inyo County, filling in for him today.
Renee Westelusk, Ridgecrest, California. I have 2 questions. One is having to do with probably a article that was published in the Bakersfield Californian Monday, October 17th. Maybe you're all aware of this, the marijuana land rush underway in Cal City. What I wanted to know is if, and this relates to this, could the effect of the passing of Proposition 64 cause current ag growers in our valley to change to growing marijuana large scale, like what may be happening in Cal City? And will the IWVGA have any influence over this? Will this be over? Will you have jurisdiction to prevent this from happening? And my second question has to do with, will the IWVGA have any jurisdiction over the private well the Timbisha Shoshone tribe will drill to supply their casino and other businesses at the proposed site? If not, is there any government agency, state, federal, that will have any jurisdiction over that well? Because as everybody knows, our basin has been declared as one of the 21 basins in critical overdraft. If you can't answer any of my questions today, I just hope that you will follow up with some kind of research or explanation in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. What I'm going to do is just gloss over real quick. I'm not going to give you specific answers. Please stop by my office, and I'll give you detailed responses. I'll go dig in with our lawyers and give you detailed answers to your questions and get those out to the public. But we don't control what farmers grow. They grow what they want to grow. We are concerned with water and how much water is used. That's our becoming our role in this whole evolution. She's right when she says there's a land rush going down in Cal City because of possible propositions being passed that reflect growing marijuana groves, and so price of land somehow is jumping in Cal City. And so we're looking at all those issues.
I just want to say one thing. From what I understand, when I read marijuana is really with water, making it becoming more water than what would be already grown here in this valley. That's my concern. It would use more water than what the agricultural industry is already using. That's why I'm worried.
Thank you, Renee. We'll take a look at that. We'll be all over that, as a matter of fact. Yes, sir.
Yes, Harold Manis. I'm in my own property. Aaron Kirschman put my well in 1982. I turned power on in 1983, and I had 100 feet of water, and he was going to drop it and give me 40 feet, and I had him add an extra 20 into it, so I had 60 feet, and there's 20 feet of that left. I can go down another 20 feet, or at a foot a year. And it dropped initially 10 feet when you first turned the pump on, so whatever you were given, or whatever you got, you lost about 10 feet of it just because of the initial pumping. And I'm just bringing this up to point out that even I'm using I turn my pump about 700 gallons at a time, and I'm using it between 9 and 11 times a year. Okay, so I'm about a little over 1% of what you're giving it at 2 acre feet a year, 640,000 or so gallons a year, and I'm using less than 10,000. But mine's still going down at a foot a year, and so it's going to, it's affecting everyone, whether it's minimum or maximum. And so just to give you a little more information on what's happening and what's been taking place over the past 30, 40 years here, right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, we'll close public comments and bring up special presentations. We're thrilled to have Mr. Ross here with us from Department of Water Resources, and he's going to give us an update on Sigma. Mr. Ross.
Thank you for inviting me to come address you here today. I'd like to just give you a pretty quick update on the different things that DWR has on its plate, some timelines, some deadlines, and some documents and projects that we're working on and that will be out pretty soon. There it goes. So just as a general outline, I'll go through each of these 6 items. GSA timeline. GSA, again, is Groundwater Sustainability Agency, so the timeline to put GSAs in place. Bulletin 118. Bulletin 118 is the document by Department of Water Resources that defines groundwater basins. We have an update coming up soon. BMP, Best Management Practices. So these are documents that DWR is releasing with respect to the groundwater sustainability plans on what is expected to be in those plans. And I'll hit that. Another legislated project that we have going is an assessment of the water available for replenishment. That, in general, has to do with water on the other side of the mountains, in particular with respect to the California water project system. And GSP alternative deadline, or groundwater sustainability plan alternative deadline, the opportunity for different areas to kind of short circuit the groundwater full sustainability plan process by showing that they're already sustainable effectively, and that they have the management in place. And then Proposition 1 funding. So the GSA notification timeline on the far right there says GSA notification deadline. All 127 high and medium priority groundwater basins are expected to have GSAs overlying them in place by June 30th of 2017. And if you start walking backward on the timing, what's involved in putting that together, the minimum amount of time you would need would be 60 days, and you'd have to really have thought things through before you even got to that point to be able to do that. So the first step to the left, 15 days, DWR, once we're notified, we have 15 days to make sure that notification qualifies and satisfies the requirements in the law, and then we post that on the DWR website. So the GSA notification to DWR needs to come within 30 days of the decision to become a GSA. And that decision would be in this board. When the board publicly makes that vote and that call and signs off on that decision, then we have 30 days where you need to get all that information to us. And then there's the public process, the standard statewide public process. You need to advertise notifications that the body is going to entertain and look at this and come to some decision as to make that notification. It looks like from the minutes from last meeting, that process is moving on here. So you're pretty well in advance of the kind of drop-dead timeline. But this is just kind of to let you know that this needs to be in place by June 30th, 2017. But it looks like you're getting that. So a couple more. 2022, the general groundwater sustainability plan deadline. In this basin, it's actually 2020. So critically overdrafted basins are due January 31st in 2020. Bulletin 118 interim update. So Bulletin 118 was last published in 2003, and we had several projects that we needed to put into an interim update for Bulletin 118, basin boundary modifications. So last spring, a lot of agencies asked us to modify their boundaries. We went through a process of making it through those. We modified some of the boundaries based on newer data sets that DWR was able to obtain. So if the boundary was, say, supposed to be on a county line, we had a better position for that county line. We went ahead and made some of those adjustments. And then we also had the modification requests, which we went through and accepted or denied. So we now have a new basin boundary data set, and that was very recently approved at our highest level, and it should be out on as a final out on the internet at this point. We needed to take those changed boundaries and see how they related to critically overdrafted basins. And so we went and looked at those to make sure that new basins that were created, perhaps from older basins that had been designated as critically overdraft, we needed to look to see whether those should be in the critically overdraft or not. And in a couple of cases, they were not showing evidence of critical overdraft. In at least one case, the change incorporated areas that are still showing evidence of critical overdraft. And so the basin boundary modification drives reprioritization of the groundwater basins. And so we're working through that as we speak. The basin boundary modifications have just been put in place, and so we've been gathering all the information to reprioritize those groundwater basins, and that should be out. We're hoping to get a public draft out in the spring-ish, around March, essentially. BMP update, so best management practices. These are driven by the legislation. Again, there's a December 31st deadline to put some of these in place, and also the groundwater sustainability regulations that came out this last spring they reference some best management practice documents that DWR is to put together again by December 31st. So at least 5 different documents are in play at this point, 2 of them having to do with monitoring systems. So one is monitoring protocols. How do we expect you to go about the physical monitoring of the wells? And what should the wells be like? Monitoring networks. How many wells for a particular area? What kind of spacing? How do you look at those monitoring networks? How do you put a monitoring network together? So that's 2 of the BMP documents. Another one has to do with water budget and water balance, which is part of what needs to be submitted as part of the groundwater sustainability plan. And so how do we look at people putting that together? Where do they get the information? What kind of information needs to be there? And then 2 other documents have to do with modeling. One, part of the groundwater sustainability plan says we expect a hydrologic conceptual model. And so what do we mean by that? What is entailed in describing to us a conceptual model of the hydrology and hydrogeology of the groundwater basin? And then basin modeling. Basin modeling is a great tool to figure out how different actions can change outcomes with your groundwater sustainability. So how do we look at groundwater modeling? What is acceptable or not acceptable? And so that document should be out as well. There's another document which will be more of a guidance document because it's not a requirement, but it will be dealing with tribal involvement and inclusion. And so it's basically going to be a document on how the tribes of California, what their idea of being included means. So how, from their perspective, would you include them in the groundwater management system? So this process, the BMP process, we're trying to get those documents out as fast as we can, hopefully by the end of this month. And 3 public meetings are required, and the documents and the ideas will be presented to the California Water Commission. We're expecting to present those, or my Sacramento staff is expecting to present those to the Water Commission's November meeting, which I believe is around November 15th-ish, around there somewhere. And there will be 3 public meetings throughout the state, probably one in the north, one in the central part of the state, and one in the south. I don't think they've set the venues yet. The last ones in the south have been in Santa Ana, for reference. December, need to post those final BMPs and the guidance documents on the webpage, and then because there are a lot more issues to cover, post in January how we're going to approach those additional documents that help explain how the GSPs, what we expect in the GSPs, and how to go about putting the GSP together. Water available for replenishment is again in the legislation for SGMA, that the DWR is supposed to look into this. They've been working on this for probably a year and a half, and a draft report should be available by the end of this calendar year. There will be a public comment period, at least 30 days, but it's undefined exactly how long that might go. It might be a 45 or a 60-day comment period. There will be a presentation workshop sometime in January or February. I'm sure it will, at least one of the workshops will have a WebEx or a webcast component to it. They usually do that one in Sacramento. And then the final report will be available sometime in mid-2017. Alternative GSPs. The deadline to submit is January 1st or December 31st. An alternative GSP can be based on 3 different things. One is an existing legislatively approved groundwater management plan, or management pursuant to an adjudication, or an analysis that shows that the basin has been within its safe yield for at least 10 years. The point of the alternative GSP is that if a groundwater managing agency, will pick one, a statutory agency like Orange County Water District. They've been managing their basin for a long time. They have a lot of management systems in place, and it's likely, I'm sure they are going to submit an alternative GSP to us, and my guess is that they are going to make the case that they've been managing their basin sustainably for at least the last decade. So this is kind of a shortcut, so you don't have to go through the entire GSP if you can show now that you're sustainably managing that basin. Proposition 1 funding. Now here's good news, at least. $100 million a year and a half ago, or 2 years ago, I guess, was voted by Californians. $10 million for state operations and $90 million for grants that go out. The first round of that was last March. There was a round for counties with stressed basins. And DWR awarded $6.7 million to counties that had stressed basins, critically overdraft basins, or basins that they could show had sustainability issues. And so some of that money is going into them putting together their GSAs and moving forward on additional information so that they can approach their GSPs. The next round of grants, and it will not be under the same conditions, is expected this next summer. And why it's expected in the next summer is that one of the criteria that's likely to be necessary is that you have a GSA in place. And these grants are expected to be specifically for helping with the groundwater sustainability plans. And so you need that GSA in place to be eligible to even ask for help with that GSP. I think that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Appreciate it. Let's open up for public comment. Anybody in the public wishing to make comment on this particular report? Mr. Ross, will you grab a seat right there? Again, let's be pithy and let's get to the point quickly and keep the ball moving. Yes, so there'll be a limit on your speed, please. Thank you.
Ron Kosinski, I have a question for Tim, and this is based on Bill Manofsky's question. I'd like to get a direct answer to it. So, Bill, if you don't mind, I'm going to quote exactly what you wrote. Tim Ross, head DWR hydrologist for Southern California, told me personally that they expect our groundwater sustainability plan to stop the aquifer from dropping. Not 3 inches per year, not 4 inches, not 6, 0. And it has to be to 2015 levels. Otherwise, they will come in, I assume they meaning the state, and run the GSA for us. This was confirmed by the office of Dave Gutierrez, director of the DWR, Groundwater Sustainability Project. So can you speak to that directly? Is that a true statement? Is it already been made a decision about what sustainability is?
I don't think that's a characterization of the conversation and what we said. Sustainability can be measured in many different ways, and the basis for sustainability with Sigma is the safe yield of the basin. So managing to a safe yield does not mean you have to hold the water table at the same level for eternity. To operate a basin conjunctively, and we've been doing this for 30, 40 years, is to utilize what water supply you have when you have it. So if you have surface water supply, you utilize that when it's available and bank your groundwater supply so that when you don't have as much surface water supply. That was 3 minutes?
You're done.
Another minute.
So back to Orange County Water District. If you watch the hydrographs and the storage in their groundwater basin through decades, it goes down and it goes up, and it goes down and it goes up. But it always comes back up. So during wet times, you're expected that groundwater basin is going to recover. During drier times, times of want, then those groundwater levels may go down. So you're operating within some range and not continually pulling that groundwater basin down. So I hope that's a better concept as to what managing to sustainable yield might look like.
Stan Rotoro. I think the interpretation for what this gentleman just said for our valley would be that we have to balance the water level. Unless somebody knows of some surface water around here that I'm not aware of, we have no surface water. So the implication is still that we have to balance our water and not let it go down. There is no surface water here. The problem with Sigma from the start, as far as I'm concerned, is that it's being controlled by a bunch of bureaucrats in Sacramento. And they don't know what's going on in California and much less in our valley. We need to start pushing back in a common sense mode to ensure that we're not trying to get pushed through a knothole here. We cannot keep unless we want to import water at more than what we are currently using because our levels are going down. I believe what Mr. Minosky said earlier is we could stop using all water and our levels would go down. We've got a China Lake playa over here on the Navy base. I believe the report that the county used a year or two ago in their land reassessment or when they changed the zoning, it said that at one point in time the China Lake playa was actually evaporating like 10,000 acre feet of water, and it's now gone down to 2,000 or 3,000 acre feet of water. So in my mind, even if nobody used any water at all, there's a good chance the aquifer is going to go down. So some of this stuff that this gentleman here was talking about, unless California is willing to somehow reroute a river through our valley, what he's talking about is absolute nonsense. Total impossibility. So please keep that in mind and don't be afraid to push back. Thank you.
Sophia Merck. My address is on file. Two questions. Which two counties were involved with the getting the money that you mentioned on one of your slides on the BNP, I think it was?
Several counties in California. My office is working with 3 counties.
3.
San Diego, Santa Barbara, and Ventura. There are many other counties in the state as well.
Okay. And I was also wondering if you looked at the first AB 303 that was done in the Indian Wells Valley. It was the first conceptual hydrology model that was completed in 2001. And have you looked at that?
I have not recently.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Don Decker, a longtime resident and student of the hydrology in this valley. The comments that we've had recently, just a few minutes ago, about the difficulty of achieving sustainability in this valley are absolutely correct. The recharge here is inadequate to support anything like what we have in our current consumption. We're off by factors of 5 or 6. It's a huge discrepancy. The only way that we're going to continue on here is with imported water. And I think that the state has an inherent responsibility here to help us achieve that that condition, that source, and we need to make sure that our applications are as clear as possible that we absolutely are on the list and need that additional water.
Renee Westerlusk, Ridgecrest, California. This is to Mr. Ross. You had mentioned the tribes of California, that they will be included in the groundwater management plan for the state as a whole, or is it based on wherever they're located or they have businesses?
Tribal lands, tribal reservation lands have a special category with respect to groundwater management, just as lands that have been adjudicated.
Excuse me, Mr. Ross. Can you people up back there hear Mr. Ross? Mr. Ross, could you go to the microphone and speak in the microphone, please?
Plus
Thanks.
the TV.
Tribal reservation lands, as well as adjudicated groundwater basins or portions of groundwater basins, have a special category in the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. And tribes with tribal lands in a groundwater basin have the option at their discretion of opting in to a groundwater sustainability agency or not, and at what level they interact with groundwater management in the basin. In some ways, the tribal lands are effectively viewed as sort of like adjudicated areas where water has been allocated, and so groundwater management needs to take place around them. If they are a significant portion of a groundwater basin, they certainly need to be involved in the groundwater management of that basin. There are many tribes in California that would like to be involved at some level, but they need to figure out what that level is. And so they've been working with DWR to try and come up with guidelines of how local agencies can involve them in the sustainable groundwater management of groundwater basins.
Renee, you done?
I have one more follow-up question. We are designated out of one of the 21 critically overdrafted basins, and we have a tribal business supposedly coming in soon. Because we're critically overdrafted, do we have any extra leverage to get them to be involved in the GSA guidelines? Because we're in a more extenuated circumstance than other tribal businesses or tribal areas that are not going to be located in a critically overdrafted basin.
I'm not aware of any special circumstances related to the critical overdraft. And not knowing the specifics, it'd be hard to say anything about what you might or might not do. One of the critical things to think about is it tribal reservation land, or is it land owned by the tribe? And those are two different things. And so I would hope that the IV Groundwater Authority would be reaching out and incorporating those tribes at some discussion level and finding out what needs to happen with respect to the necessary water for the tribe and for the valley.
Donna Hawker, Association of Realtors Office. I just had a clarification, if you don't mind. Who will determine the safe yield specifically for the Indian Wells Valley? And will that determination include any future economic growth?
The safe yield would be presented to DWR as part of the groundwater sustainability plan. And I know studies have gone on in the past, and there have been estimates of safe yield for the basin. That doesn't mean additional study might refine that, but that would be part of the groundwater sustainability plan. And so DWR wouldn't have really any say in what that is. It would be presented as the scientific evidence and study as part of the plan itself.
So the group here today could be the ones specifically determining what that safe yield is?
Yes, the technical advisory committee would be presumably looking at all that as they put together the specifics of the hydrogeology of the basin and where the basin is at this point, the current status of the basin.
Okay, I see no other takers, so let's close the public review of this item and bring it back to the board for comments, concerns, considerations. Anybody on the board wishing to speak on this issue? As we go through this, if you have something to say, please raise your hand. I'll call on you, and then you can speak. Mr. Brown.
Can you guys hear me out there? Need longer mics here. Anyways, my question's kind of, maybe it's easy. Are there any revelations in the BMPs that you guys are going to publish? Because I'm familiar with a lot of the, logical ones. I was just curious if there's something interesting we could be looking forward to.
I'm not sure exactly what you consider interesting, but people in Sacramento have been really working hard on this, and it hasn't gone out hasn't gone out to my group in Southern California to really look at. So I'm not real familiar with exactly what's going to be presented. I wouldn't expect it to be wildly different if you have been, kind of involved in what's going on and what the discussions have been going on in the last couple of years.
Any other board members?
Right here, Mick.
Yes, sir.
Brian Longbottom at the base here. So along the same lines, and we'll talk about this a little bit later today, the Navy working with the Water District and company, we've been working and investing a lot of money in an updated groundwater model for the basin over the last year or more. Is there any revelations related to what might be coming out in that best practice that we should be aware of today as we move forward with that model? Because we are investing money real time right now on that one.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Is this general consultant, or is this federal, like the USGS or somebody working on this?
It's a Desert Research Institute.
Okay. I wouldn't expect any big revelations. Some of the issues that came up in discussions previously, people have groundwater models in place, and there are different sets of software, some proprietary and some not. The USGS's software, or the base calculation system for a groundwater model, is out there. There's another one that's also public domain, but there are other proprietary ones that consultants have used. And so the question was, do I have to redo my whole model when I've paid all this money for a consultant to put this specific model together for me? And the answer is no, if you have it already in place. But moving forward, if you're building a new one, then it needs to be more open and apparent. It needs to be on a public domain calculation platform, and then as well, all of the background information needs to be publicly available.
So, but for the purposes of putting together and submitting a GSP,
right,
that would be suitable, what we're doing today?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
I have a question. Are there any GSAs that you've already approved? Are there any of them that have sovereign land, Indian tribes, not a reservation, but sovereign lands inside their GSP that you know of?
Not that I know of specifically.
are there rules for engagement, or are we going to develop that?
There are no requirements in terms of how engagement takes place.
Or participation too, please.
Right. Sigma doesn't really address how tribal participation takes place, other than it gives them the option to basically volunteer. They can choose to become involved at whatever level is comfortable to them and the body they're involved with, or not. They can just not be involved at all. So any place in between there. And and different tribes have different ways and relationships with their local agencies, and so all of that's a real specific local kind of issue to work with the local constituents.
Okay, with no models to follow and no rules to follow, we will, I guess, be expected to develop our own.
Yes, again, this guidance document is basically from discussions with California tribes as to how they would like to be approached, how they might see being involved and included in the conversation and potentially in the management. And then from there, it's all a local development of that relationship.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Don't go anywhere. Anyone else? I got a couple for you, Mr. Ross. Thank you for being here. Were you on the phone when I was up in Sacramento last week?
I was.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Then you're privy to the conversation I had with Mr. Gutierrez, and you participated in that. A couple things. One of the things he impressed me about was how he understands the unique nature of our aquifer. Our geology is different from anywhere else in the state, and we require certain specific needs and understandings in order to achieve the objectives of Sigma. So I appreciate you being down here. I think he said he would have DWR. You're from the LA office?
Yeah.
That you'd be able to attend our meetings, to come up here on a regular basis to keep us informed and give us regular presentations from a DWR perspective. And I'd like those presentations to be more focused on the Indian Wells Valley. I appreciate understanding Orange County. It means you're building context for us all. We need that context. We understand that we are one of many critically overdrafted basins and one of hundreds of overdrafted basins. But I would like to have DWR, and I would like the public to have assurance and understanding that DWR is, bam, right on top of what we're doing and what we're talking about and giving us regular advice specific to the Indian Wells Valley, not necessarily to Orange County. So if you please, I enjoy the context, appreciate that, but I need some focus on Indian Wells Valley. Alternative GSPs, does that have anything to do with us?
Nope.
Thank you. Then we don't need to hear about it unless it's something that builds context. I'm trying to cut down. I'm trying, these people want fight, and I'm giving them fight.
On the same note, the water for replenishment probably doesn't.
I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
We're not sure about that. I know the public is not aware of issues, but we are working back channels to do stuff, and when it's time, we will make revelations if they happen. Mr. Ross, finally, I want to thank you for being here. I want to thank you for what you do and what you're doing here. I appreciate your coming. I appreciate these presentations, and we need DWR to be fully involved in understanding that we are a unique basin. You've heard many people talk here, very smart people, not regular guys like me, smart people saying that we may not be able to achieve. We need to move that from anecdotal theories to facts, to science, and then develop a plan based on real data. But we may be going in the direction those gentlemen talk about. So thank you for being here. Okay.
I'd like to.
Yes.
No, I just
Mr.
talked about replenishment and what LA County already takes. Is that going to be provided here? So when we look at the water they're taking as replenishment, would that be made available to our organization in the same light?
I have no idea. I can't answer that one. I haven't looked at the draft of the water for replenishment. My understanding is that the general exercise was to look mainly at the Central Valley and the Central Valley system as to how much water might be available for replenishment in that system. But I haven't. I'm not real familiar with that.
Though. You'll be able to broaden that look.
Yes.
Okay. Then at the same time, what do you believe the state would make available? Potentially, as far as if we're going into overdrafts, as far as freewheeling additional sources of water, do you have an idea of the amounts the state could make available?
For Indian Wells Valley?
Yes.
No, I don't. I'm not aware of any state waters in this.
Well, I know at our MWA that we get allotment, we get over what's considered free use that we can purchase for replenishment. And that's just something I'd like to know if that's going to be made available here in the same way from the state.
I can look into that.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Parker.
Yeah, it's really a comment and a question of clarification related to Indian Wells Valley. So there's been some confusion on this critically overdrafted category, yet it's a medium priority basin. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts on whether the prioritization of this particular basin is going to change.
I do not expect the prioritization of this basin to change. We're using newer information in the prioritization. And then there's an added category that was put in with Sigma having to do with water and groundwater, surface water interaction. So that's another category to look at. I would not expect for most of the high and medium priority groundwater basins that they will change from that. We're kind of expecting a few basins to potentially come onto the list that we kind of missed before. Possibly a couple come off of the list that maybe are doing better or we didn't understand quite as well. I wouldn't expect Indian Wells Valley to change at this point.
Thanks.
Thanks, sir. Last comment from anybody else? Last comment from me is I'd like to DWR. We have reached out to the tribal nations for participation in Sigma. I'd like for you to keep an eye on how that's going, how we're doing, and help shape our conversations with them as we move forward. Make sure we don't stub our toes or do anything dumb. Thank you very much. We're done with that one. Let's move. Do we need a vote on that? So, no? Keith, no? Okay, thank you very much. We're moving on to consent calendar. If the board would like to discuss any item listed, let's open up to the public. I'm going to go through the consent agenda. You're going to look at it. I'm going to ask you if you want to pull anything off the consent agenda. You will pull it off and we'll discuss it if you need to. Other than that, this board thinks that these matters are routine and non-controversial. And so we will then pass it to the board and ask them for their opinion, and then we'll pass the consent agenda. We have one item on the consent agenda, and that is the minute meetings of September 15th, 2016. Does anybody in the public wish to pull those meeting minutes off the agenda? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board for a vote and a comment on the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
If I may, in front of you, you have a updated minutes. We had some changes that we made that we left copies out there for the public as well. So this is we had some order and some minor changes, but we wanted to adopt this copy as the final minutes.
Okay, thank you. I need a vote.
Do you need a motion?
I need a motion.
I'll move the item.
I'll second.
Please cast your vote, or say if you're in favor. Aye. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, moving right along. Item number 6, approval of recommendations from ad hoc committee on IWVGA committee membership, mission statements, and organizational structure. Alan, kick us off.
Is that working? It is. Mr. Chairman, members of the Groundwater Authority Board, at your last meeting, you formed a ad hoc committee comprised of Mr. Gleason and Mr. Brown. That ad hoc committee met and discussed committees, which was our charge. Let me back up and sort of give a big picture. I'm sure that the committee members will share some of their thoughts, but this item is really the first step or first couple of steps in a process that will be formation of committees. It is not complete by any stretch of the imagination, but our task was to do a couple of things, which was to set up. We already got direction that the board wanted a technical committee and a policy committee. So we formed those, or at least we were tasked to do a mission statement and also to fill the membership of those committees. And so that's what this committee did. We have more work to do. How those committees will function, a charter, if you will, that talks about the sort of the rules of engagement and how that committee or committees will work. That's going to take some work down the road. But we felt it was important that we know that membership was a big issue, and we wanted to get that out of the way. And so that's what you have before you. So I wanted to make sure that the point is this is not the complete period, done with committees. There will still be more work to be done. But this is an important first step. So as we go through here, it's pretty self-explanatory. We have two committees. They are standing committees that we Brown Act committees. So that means that they are open to the public. They will function much like this, although they probably won't be done at this dais. But all the rules of the Brown Act would apply. The board could form other committees later if they choose to do so. We developed a mission statement and objectives. I'm not going to go. I'll read through some of these because I think they're important, and they're identified in bullets. Work collaboratively with. Now, first, I'm talking about the Policy Advisory Committee. This is the mission statement for the Policy Advisory Committee. Work collaboratively with other members who represent groundwater users. Work towards a common understanding of the basin. Support efforts that aim to meet the basin management objectives to protect resources, ensure local control, and address future and current water needs and support the economy and the environment. Negotiate in good faith to achieve consensus on management of the Indian Wells Valley water basin. Negotiate is probably a strong word. Ultimately, this, if there's negotiation, it'll be done within the group. But the recommendations of the PAC will be given to the board, and the board will ultimately make that decision. Make a unified recommendation to the board, and so that we can comply with SGMA by the SGMA deadlines. One of the most important things that we talked about is in concept is that the board would direct committees, both the PAC and the TAC, the activities of those committees. So this board, we would envision, would say to the PAC or the TAC. In this case, we're talking about the PAC. Here are the things we'd like you to work on. Here's number one. Work on that, come back to us. Here's number two, work on that, come back to us. And so those things are driven by the board. The PAC membership, and again, this was the best. It's not the best, but what we came up with. Let me go through the membership. You have this before you. You've had a chance to look at it. A total of 17 members, 5 from each of the voting members of the 5 members of this board. 1 for each of the associate members, the Navy and BLM. 2 from large agriculture. 1 from small agriculture. 2 from business interests. 2, and this is 2 representatives each. 2 from domestic well owners. 1 from a planning background. one from environmental, and we have, at your last board meeting, you had committed to put the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District on the board, and we would put them in that category of environmental. And then industrial. We have identified individual members that were discussed as far as members. It would be our recommendation that these positions be included in the bylaws. We would prefer that you not name those specifically in the bylaws, because we don't know how long any entity is going to exist. But there is some desire to have those individuals: Meadowbrook, Mojave Pistachio for the agricultural positions, and Searles Valley Minerals for the industrial position. With the technical committee, the TAC, very similar objectives, very similar concepts. In this case, much of the thought process or the ideas about the TAC come from the existing TAC. The TAC that is used in the cooperative groundwater group. They have a TAC. They have technical people that are on that TAC. We would recommend that members of this TAC have the following: formal education and experience in a water or groundwater related field, technical background, but not in these areas, but not limited to these areas: geology, hydrology, hydrogeology, engineering, energy, and ecology, and an understanding of the Indian Wells Valley Basin. Must not be a political appointee or elected official, but a technical person. Must not have a legal conflict of interest with services on the TAC. As far as membership goes, 12 members the committee had proposed. 5 for each of the members, 2 for each of the associate members, the Navy and BLM, 1 agriculture, 1 domestic well owner, 1 industrial, 1 for the Kern County Water Agency, which currently serves on the TAC, the other TAC with the cooperative group, and then an employee, a technical employee or consultant from this organization to represent the interests of this body. So with that, our recommendation is that you follow the recommendations of the ad hoc committee. I'm sure that both of those members can add to if I've missed anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Before we go to the public, any first blush comments from the board? Yes, sir.
I have a question. What were you envisioning on the policy advisory committee for the planning position? It seems to me that most of the planning functions are already captured in the counties and the city. So what would the separate planning position? Who would that be for?
The planning commission, the one planning. Yeah. Kern County. My vision was Kern County planning. I was going to discuss that. The Kern County planning power.
You were going to discuss this, Mr. Chair. I think the thought is that Kern County is going through a general plan update, and that coordination with this body is kind of critical, so that process can help this process.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
Does the domestic well owner position mean a single well owner? Does it mean an organization? Does it mean mutuals? One of the questions that was raised is if the de minimis users are not involved at this point in time, would a single well owner be be appropriate for that spot? I'm wondering if we could make it mutuals, because some of them, I know there's a Sierra Breeze, East Inyukur Mutual, have very, very large mutuals, like 80 to 100 connections. Would it be more appropriate to have something like that, or just not? I don't want to say it must be, but open it up so it could be.
If you can, through the chair, that does make some sense on the technical side. There may be some individual well owners that have technical ability, but a mutual probably has more ability to provide somebody that has technical ability. So we really had not gotten into that level of detail. We just wanted to make sure those folks would be represented.
I'd like you to keep that open then.
I think it's a great idea, Peggy, if I could comment on that. I think from the sounds of it, they represent more people, and the whole focus of this group is representative in nature. And so I think that's a good point. Any other comments from board members? Yes, sir.
Mr. Christensen, just one comment on, or I guess a point of clarification. We talked in the policy advisory committee that negotiate may not be a good word, but in the very next bullet, I think the expectation, though, is that committee is submitting a unified plan to be voted upon, right? So maybe not negotiate, but collaborate. There's some amount of teamwork that goes into that the output is a consensus for the board to vote on.
Through the chair, that's exactly right. Consensus, you could say, is negotiated, but it's really intended to be an outcome that is generally agreed upon by the group.
Thank you.
Mr. Brown.
When Mick and I were talking about this, I guess I'm on. Anyways, some of these, we pretty much started out with titles or functionality. In my original draft or my first run of what Peter Brown thought was to have these in a functional components. So I was thinking, the advisory committee would only be people that had wells or something like that. This turned out to be a better profile because it's policy driven. What I want to remind everybody is this is a suggested committee structure, and these are suggested members. The large agriculture to me was just kind of de facto or whatever because of the two largest farms, so that was kind of easy. Industrial, Searles Valley Mineral, I don't know of any larger industrial, so that was representative. These other ones, Peggy, you have a good point. We were talking about, who represents business? And so just food for thought, I was thinking, the Chamber of Commerce kind of represents business, so maybe that would be a good thing. I don't know whether it should be maybe they decide who represents the Chamber of Commerce, but the harder part with these, as you get to domestic well owners, is how do you get a representative? So one of the things we'll do is we'll develop a process where people can apply, or maybe we have a better description of who you should be. Because what we want to do is we do want to be all inclusive. I really had a tough time with 17 people on a board making any decisions. My goal was to keep it in 12 or 13, but it just wasn't practical for the size of the area that we have. So these are suggestions. Populating it with these entities, I think, are common sense. And the fact is that whatever they come up with, we'll have to adhere to the outline of the plan. So it can't be something totally outlandish. So there's a plan there's a structure for the plan that the committee and the TAC will help us create, and it'll follow the plan, because for the state to accept it, it has to follow their outline. So just, I don't know if it's words of assurance or just restating it. These two committees are going to help create a plan, and the plan's going to follow the mandatory places that the state wants us to be at. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks, sir. Okay, let's open the public hearing. Anybody wishing to make comment? Could you raise your hand if you wish to make comment? Okay, could you please all slide out? I'd like to keep this thing moving because we have about 38 minutes left to go, and please keep your comments pithy. Thank you.
Sophia Merck. I would like to know when the ad hoc committee met, and is the public invited like they are in the standing committee?
Yes. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, the question again?
When did the ad hoc committee meet, and was the public invited?
The ad hoc committee, the public was not invited. The ad hoc committee met last week I'd have to check my calendar, on a Thursday.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So we have no date when the ad hoc committee met?
We'll get you one. Can you get a specific
I can
date?
tell you in a moment if you let me check my calendar.
Thank you. I'll let the next person speak.
Thank you.
Judy Decker. My concern is something that I've brought to you before, and that is equal representation. You have people that live in this valley who have private wells, who, by their very definition of living on acreage, having private wells, are pretty self-sufficient. They are underrepresented here, big time. You have people that live within the city. They happen to be business owners in the city. They're going to be represented by the county, the city, the water district, and now they're going to have their own representative. I'm not picking on business. That just happens to be who I can remember at the moment without having my list. I think you need to think carefully about overrepresenting some people and underrepresenting others. If the water district would fail, there's going to be a whole lot of people in big trouble. Unfortunately, if a private domestic well owner's well fails, or if poor quality water comes into that well, he's in big trouble. Not only does he not have any water, his land will become worthless. And I have one other thing. You're going to have these committees. You're going to have this board. You have this board. Is everything that the committee brings to the board, is the board then going to take whatever it is back to their respective agencies and then bring it back to the board and then bring it back to the committee? If that's how it's going to work, it's going to be very awkward and very time-consuming. And I feel that our situation is urgent enough that you might have to look at having 2 meetings a month.
Thank you, ma'am.
Stan Rotora. I was noticing in the requirements for the committees that the TAC committee has at the bottom a requirement for no legal conflict of interest. And I was curious why that particular committee was spelled out as a requirement for having no conflict of interest. I would think that the policy committee would be just as likely or more likely to have a conflict of interest than a technical person on a technical committee. As a matter of fact, I would expect the whole GSA to have a conflict of interest requirement. I don't understand the specifics associated with the single requirement under the TAC committee to have no conflict, legal conflict of interest. It just seems out of place.
Thank you, sir. I'm sorry. Are you done? Did you finish your question? I thought I might have stepped on that.
That was basically it. I don't think I can go into any more detail. It just seems out of place. There should be a conflict of interest requirement on this whole panel, the policy committee, as well as the technical committee, and I don't see any reason to have an additional explicit requirement on the technical committee. As a matter of fact, it's the one I would expect to have the least concern about. If it's a technical issue, it should be a technical issue, whereas the policy issues, I would think, would be the area where there would be more likely to have a conflict. But again, the conflict of interest should apply to everybody associated with the whole program, not specifically members of any specific area. Thank you.
Through the chair, I'm not sure why we got that stuff. Tim, can you help me out with the conflict of interest? Where did we get that language from? Was that do you remember?
Yeah, that's part of the language that came from the existing TAC. Thank you. So it's kind of cobbled together a bit, and so we will clarify that and straighten it out in the future.
Thank you. Next up.
Donna Hawker, I realize this is just the first step of many that you have to take on these committees, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, just as a friendly reminder, that our realtors may not fit in that business portion of that committee. So maybe, and I know, again, you're just starting, so maybe expanding that a little bit more, because they'll deal with property rights, property values, all of those things that are important to this. Thank you.
Thank you. I think they're a perfect fit personally, but we'll take that on board.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board through the chair, Derek Hoffman from Meadowbrook. It's good to see you. We submitted a very brief comment letter on the committee's concept, and I'll just summarize it today, and I'll give extra copies if you haven't had a chance to read it. Just 3 comments. First, we see that Meadowbrook is named as holding one of those large agriculture seats on the Policy Advisory Committee, and we express appreciation for that. We thank you for your work and the work of the staff on that point and in their recommendation today. I do have one semantic request on that. Meadowbrook Farms is named there, and we just ask that it simply say Meadowbrook, just to avoid any confusion, since Farms is not in the name. I assume that's an easy change. And then the third comment I have, it has to do with the Technical Advisory Committee. And our request on that point would be simple. It would be to add 1 additional seat for agriculture on the Technical Advisory Committee. As has been said today, the Technical Advisory Committee will be a workhorse on technical matters, and it will play a vital role to ensure that management decisions are made based on sound, complete, and accurate technical information, technical science. And we've heard it said today several times that we do have a unique basin with unique issues, and that will require a broad range and a depth of technical skill and ability. And so large agricultural entities like Meadowbrook, Mojave, we have the ability to provide consultants and members of a TAC that would have the technical skill and ability to benefit both the TAC, the board, and the basin. Much as has been done with the cooperative group, the Technical Advisory Committee is comprised of members who are nominated by members of the cooperative group, so long as those consultants or technical experts match the criteria that are set. And likewise here, we see that the proposal has a set of criteria for technical committee members. And again, we believe that large agricultural entities like Meadowbrook would be able to provide an expert like that for the TAC, and that an additional seat for agriculture on that committee will help the committee, the board, and the basin. So we hope you'll consider our request for the Technical Advisory Committee, and again, we thank you for your proposal for the Policy Advisory Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Next up.
May I ask one question? Are you asking for, through the chair, please, are you asking for 2 egg seats? Is that what you're saying? 1 egg seat and 1 large egg seat?
2 agricultural seats for the Technical Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, everybody. Joshua Nugent on behalf of Mojave Pistachios and Nugent Farms. Just also wanted to echo that we appreciate the efforts and consideration made towards developing the Policy Advisory Committee and the Technical Advisory Committee. Specifically, we appreciate you guys honoring our request for the inclusion of Mojave Pistachios and Meadowbrook on the PAC as named entities. It's our intention to work cooperatively with all stakeholders and to develop a consensus-based groundwater sustainability plan. We have one request, and that's that an additional seat be added on the TAC for agriculture. We ask this because we understand that Meadowbrook intends to retain a qualified technical consultant in the hopes that it will participate in the GSP process in the Indian Wells Valley. As you know, Anthony Brown, representing Aqualogic, has been representing Mojave on the TAC for the current cooperative working group for some time. We hope that he will continue to represent us on the TAC for the Groundwater Authority. We feel that Meadowbrook and Mojave Mutual, 2 large agricultural interests in the valley, should both be represented on the TAC by competent professionals. And more importantly, there should also be no concern about undue control. Really, we're after mutual consensus here. We're most likely to achieve consensus if all the prominent groundwater basin users participate in, learn from, and are a part of the process. Also, as Mr. Christensen pointed out, this is only an advisory body as well, and ultimately it's your board that will be making the decisions. We hope the Groundwater Authority will welcome participation of competent technical professionals from all stakeholders willing to offer their services. And again, we thank you for your consideration thus far, and we think we're headed in the right direction. So thanks, you guys.
Thank you, sir.
Elaine Mead. Good morning, Chairman Gleason and Board. I have one question, following a tough act behind those guys. Could you please explain the difference between large agriculture and small agriculture? And do either of these categories include the constantly increasing population of hobby farms in our valley? And just in case you ask me, a hobby farm, I looked it up, a small farm operated primarily for pleasure instead of profit.
Thank you. I'll give you a quick one on that. We have had initial conversations on how we define lag and separate large ag from small ag. I said 250 acres. Peter was saying, let's make it 1,000 acres. We were going back and forth. So what we did is, instead of having a subjective response certainly from me, who doesn't know a hole in the wall about the size of the farms, we're going to do an analysis of the Indian Wells Valley and the farms that exist currently, and we're going to lay those all out, and we're going to come up with a number that can have justification for separating large ag from small ag.
So at this point, you don't have a definition of small ag or know if it contains hobby farms?
We will have that when this thing goes formal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Don Decker again. I have a comment about membership. The TAC's purpose is primarily as a technical committee, and there's a struggle here to provide the representation that is required, but more so, I would say the problem is providing really the technical leadership that needs to be there. As far as Judy Decker's comments about the private well owners being really underrepresented, one position there for the entire rural small well community, I think, is really inadequate. And there are technical people both in the domestic well owner, the co-op well, mutual well community, as well as the domestic well community, who are fully up to speed with groundwater issues here, who have lived here for a long, long time. Don't cut the rural community short. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, I'm ready to close the public hearing because I see no further comments, and bring it to this board for comment consideration. Before I do, Mr. Lemieux.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about the TAC. Is it contemplated that the JPA would be hiring a technical consulting engineer to help prepare the GSP? And if so, how does that interface with the TAC? I noticed that there's an expectation that each of the member agencies may appoint an expert to the TAC. And I'm wondering, does that mean we'd have, for example, on the part of the city, would we be sort of contributing presumably to an engineer for the JPA, and then also be hiring a separate consultant for the TAC, or how's that interact?
I don't think we've finalized that yet. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a 2 steps. We'll have more to go. I think I had always personally anticipated that we would have a strong technical person, probably a consultant, driving and overseeing all of this work. So,
I would, if that's the will of the board, I would recommend that we add a bullet point in terms of the TAC's responsibility to be something about interfacing with JPA engineer, if any, work through that process.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so board, we're ready for comment. Mr. Brown.
So the last bullet, or the last person, the IWVGA, that was kind of, I thought was our intent, was to have a representative of the functionality of putting together the plan. So that's that in my interpretation, and it might not be as somebody else's, but that's what that was for, the last one. So somebody like Tim over there, somebody who's kind of works for everybody eventually, I guess.
No, he doesn't.
No, I guess not.
I'm sorry, I'm looking. Any other thoughts? I have a couple. Let me throw a couple out there. What I'd like to see here is, I think it's a good first start. I think we got an idea out there. The public's chewing on it. We're chewing on it, and we can refine it, bring it back maybe next month, and we'll have a better idea of where we want to go. I would like to institutionalize some thoughts and some process on how the relationships between this board and the PAC and the TAC. I would like first of all, I would like clearly understood, my thoughts, my opinion, that each of these members here is a representative. They're not responding primarily to individual thoughts. They're responsible to represent their group. How that group manifests itself and manages itself is up to them. I would like no lawyers on this group. Just a thought. I would like the authority to retain this board, to retain the authority to remove any of the members. If performance is not going in the way we need it to go, and they're not achieving desired objectives, then we need to be able to insert ourselves into the mechanics of this board and to remove and add or find some way of adding members. Second, the last thing is I think this PAC is responsive bodies. I don't think this PAC is going to go off in a corner and develop a GSP and come back to us and say, here's your product, vote up or down on it. I think it needs to be institutionalized that this PAC is task-oriented and responsive to this board. Now, maybe that is already in there when you say advisory, and you qualify it as advisory. Maybe it is, but I don't read it like that. And I'd like to be just clear as a bell that that this body is making decisions, and we need, and I think we're going to get it, but I think I would like to see it institutionalized as that. I heard people talk about over and under representing. Let's look at that. That's a good one. Conflict of interest is a good thing to be looking at, and I think the Board of Realtors is a perfect fit for us. Those are my thoughts. Anyone else with thoughts? Yes, sir.
No, my question just went back with the consultant, and if you can lean back with that for compliance with the law. Are we going to rely on Kern County Council, or are we going to look for outside legal advice for compliance as we move forward? On the consultant's recommendations that we're looking at bringing in, how are we going to double check that? It's really the question is going to be Kern, or are we going to hire outside counsel?
Okay, look,
that's more looking in the future, but something I think we need to address.
Right. I think, it is. Those are real good thoughts. I don't know that Kern is capable of providing that service, but we need to understand how we're going to go move forward with that. Yes, sir.
So the whole point of having it being a Brown Act notice meeting is you have to declare whether or not you have a conflict of interest in the way that my board conducts. It's right in there with the narrative that and that's like the third thing on the agenda at all times. So it's stated from the TAC, from the Cooperative Groundwater Group, and that's a highly functional, very successful group of technical people. But for all the meetings, the Brown Act dictates that you have to declare whether or not you have a conflict of interest. So just some more words of reassurance if anybody needs that.
Thank you, sir. Other thoughts? Yes, ma'am.
I understand what Keith said, and I am of the same. Thank you for saying it, but I happen to agree. I think we need to look at how this committee is being driven and I would like it to be solely on the basis of there is someone who will be responsible for the information that comes out from all the committees, but especially from the technical committee, because it is technical. And there's so many avenues of thought that we've seen in this valley. I can see it being, well, he said and she said and this study said and this study said. I'm thinking there needs to be a technical person that leads it, and may need to be the one in case we ever get into a lawsuit, and I hope to God we don't, but to recognizing that there needs to be a technical person that will have to answer to the court why these things were done. And I'd like to see that person be a part of that committee. I don't know how it's going to be funded. I don't know if it can be funded through the grant money, but somebody who's going to be not necessarily the leader, but be able to speak for that committee.
I agree. One last thought for me. I don't think that we've done a fair job using the Resource Conservation District. I like the fact that they're a vote, but I think they're being underutilized. I think we need a more. I think they can do more for us, and I think they can perform in ways that they've got time. They're people who are concerned. There's a legacy of knowledge. They've got technical expertise. They understand the law, at least relationships with the law. And I would like to see a more robust use of our Resource Conservation District as we move forward. Any other thoughts? Okay, so if we have. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing about the Cooperative Groundwater Management Group and the Cooperative Groundwater TAC. And that is one thing I think that we've been trying to do is create a structure that will satisfy what the co-op is doing. And so this is an ongoing dialogue. I know the co-op's going to meet later today and discussing how you transform the co-op into these new groundwater authority committees, and hopefully that people will have a positive and response to what's being created so far, and if not, then give us some feedback on where we go to make that suitable for everybody. And that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate it. I need a motion and a vote.
Outline.
So let's read that into the minutes. The motion will be to, if you make it, is approval of recommendations from the ad hoc committee on IWVGA committee membership, mission statements, and organizational structure.
Yes.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Can I ask for some clarification?
Yeah.
Are you expecting us to bring back another version incorporating the change? Okay.
Yes.
So you've approved, you've accepted this as a draft, and you want us to come back with a redraft. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. That was my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
I thought that was in there. Okay. Number 7, discussion of revenue consultant study. And we're running out of time. We have another follow-on meeting at this.
I will be very brief. Really, this was just intended to let, in the spirit of full disclosure, let the board know that we need to come back to you. And our plan was to come at, hopefully around the first of the year with a revenue proposal. And we have not internally discussed how that might happen. I've suggested that we may have a consultant. I've spoke with the attorneys, and they have some ideas that might work. So that may be a little variation on that. I'm very open to that. But the point is that we're going to have to get some funding to support your organization. This is just a report to let you know that it's coming, and we're going to have to come to grips with it. So that's my report.
Thank you. We don't need a motion on that. Motion, correct? No motion required. So the discussion we just had. Any comments on the discussion?
Now, my earlier questions were more relevant to that, but I think the sooner from San Bernardino's perspective that we have an idea of what we're going to need would be helpful.
Yes, sir. Mr. Parker.
Yeah, our original budget was $75,000, I think, to get us through this year, and based on what we saw from DWR, the grant proposal applications will be available the middle of 2017, which I'm just going to throw something out, maybe Tim can nod, which meaning that money would not be through that process to a contract and available to start spending until at least the beginning of 2018. And I don't know if that maybe later, maybe sooner, but somewhere around the end of 2017 is where we could expect to get funding for a grant. Just throw that on the table in terms of future funding needs.
Thank you, sir. Okay, let's move on. No further discussion. Number 8, report on public hearing to consider election of the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority to act as a groundwater sustainability agency for the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Basin.
Mr. Chairman, I will be brief. Again, this is a report, again, for the public, for the board, to let you know what's coming in November. So at the last meeting, you voted 5-0 to notice and hold a public hearing on November 17th and to consider becoming a GSA for the entire Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Basin. That hearing has been noticed and will be a part of the next Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority meeting a month from now. That will be held here at 10 a.m. as part of that meeting. At that hearing, the public will be able to comment on the formation of a GSA. Also at that meeting, you will have an opportunity to direct staff to file as a GSA. If that was your desire, we would file immediately because as I hope we've talked about, there's a 90-day sort of waiting period. 90 days once you file, decide you're going to be a GSA, in our case for the basin, you've got 90 days before DWR puts the official stamp on your GSA. So if you did it in November, that means that you would be official sometime in February. Again, we have noticed all that either we have or we're about to. I'm not sure if it's hit the paper or not. Just a report on where we're at in relationship with other agencies, because I think early on we were sort of ahead. I would characterize us as somewhere in the middle of the pack now. As of October 11th, 219 agency formation notifications had been filed with DWR, probably more since then. 93 of those applications were in overlap, or 42%. 126 GSA applications have been named exclusive by DWR, meaning the 90-day period had elapsed and they are officially the GSA. So we are not really ahead of the game. Again, I would characterize we're moving along, but we do need to, I think you need to file as a GSA as soon as possible. The comment by DWR about grants was another further incentive to get filed and get going. Again, our deadline to file as a GSA is June 30th of 2017. So you've got, it's October. So let's say we're around to November. So now you have 7 months. It's like 8 months. Sorry, to do that. That concludes my report. There's no action that you need to take.
Thank you. Let's have a board comment. Any thoughts from board members on this issue?
I thought we'd agreed. Sorry, I'm getting used to this format. I thought we'd already agreed to do this in September. So do we have to do anything further?
No. Again, it's only a report.
So you're just going to post that there'll be a public hearing in November 17th or whatever day it is. Okay.
Mr. Lovingood, did you have a thought? Anyone else? Is a vote required?
Nope.
Thank you very much. Move on to number 9, closing comments. Any member of the board wishing to make closing comments, now's your chance. Yes.
Just a couple real quick, and I may have missed my opportunity on this one, but related to the TAC and the Policy Advisory Committee, would it be beneficial at this point to make a motion? I don't know if I'm allowed to do that as a non-voting member. For the existing TAC and the existing cooperative groundwater management groups to be the acting bodies until we get these established? Does that make sense?
I didn't hear the question.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We can't do that now for a couple reasons, but one is that I don't think that's properly noticed on the agenda.
Okay. I just wanted to, I guess my interest is, of course, moving things forward. And to that end, I guess the comment I wanted to make is a couple things real briefly. One, I'm a CB. And for those of you that know the CBs, our motto is can do. So it does bother me a little bit, some of the comments I've heard today. While at the end of the day, we may reach a wall, we're not at that wall today. So I hope that we all as a team and a community can stay focused on the fact that we can do this. If we pull together and eliminate the disagreements and bridge the gaps, I am extremely confident that we as a community can pull together and come up with a plan to be sustainable. To that end, and we've mentioned this several times in the past, we're not sitting in limbo right now. While we're in the process of establishing the GSA, figuring out how all of this structure is going to be set up, we have organizations who I just mentioned out of turn and off agenda, which I apologize for, the Technical Advisory Committee, as well as the Cooperative Groundwater Management Group, as well as several internal groups that we have on the Navy base that have been working and investing hundreds of thousands of dollars to the ends that we talk about. One such example I alluded to earlier in the meeting is that, my partners who I'm very proud of on the installation, the Naval Air Warfare Center Weapons Division, working with the Naval Air Weapons Station China Lake, have invested and brought Desert Research Institute on board to take all of the existing groundwater models that have existed in the basin and to bring them up to date, to reduce to calibrate a model, to reduce the errors shown in those models. And so we're very anxious as the TAC and the PAC get established. One of the first things that I want to do is bring DRI into these meetings, get that model released to the Technical Advisory Committee so that they can start processing it. We talked about this the other day at a brackish water meeting. We have a ton of data coming in from Stanford for brackish water studies that have been coordinated through the water district. We're going to process that data through the Desert Research Institute model and determine some more potential data gaps that we have. And then we're going to move out and try and fill those data gaps. So these are all things that are happening behind the scenes. And again, I apologize if I jumped the gun to get these two groups going. But we're chomping at the bit to be part of this solution. And again, we can do this. If we're saying today that we're done, history has shown us that when you say in the beginning you're done, you will be done. So please, let's not get to that point today before we've even tried to establish a plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Very nice. Mr. Brown.
Well said. I think that you should make this motion at our meeting this afternoon at 2 o'clock.
Can I make a motion there?
Yes, you can. And a good word I would say would be merge. I've gone through all variations of words, so that one feels good.
Merge? Okay.
But by all things that we've already listed, the structure is already mirroring that for the most part. So that would be a great place for you to make that motion today. And thank you.
Thank you, Manna. Can I make a couple comments before we go? I know it's getting close to the time. First of all, I spoke. I want to correct something I didn't come across. Sometimes I'm a little too inarticulate when I say things. When I was talking about throwing someone off the board, I didn't mean we were just going to grab someone and retain the right to throw somebody off the board. I really didn't. But because there's no doubt it's not going to happen. I don't believe. But I wanted to more clearly articulate what I want to say is that this board needs to ensure the productivity of all the committees. And That's what we want to do. And we're not going to do something without full public scrutiny, full public review, and it would be all in accordance with the Brown Act. And we're not just going to go off on our own way because we want to go see blue skies instead of clouds. We're going to go do stuff. That's not the way it's going to work. And that's not the way I meant it from how I think. My job is being a representative of you. I need to I need to inform you and keep you as smart as I am about this stuff, and I try to do that. I met with DWR last week. I think it was last week, and I want to give you a quick rundown of my conversation with Mr. Gutierrez, where we also had Mr. Ross participate via phone from L.A. and several other individuals, Rick Jurisovich, Brian Muniz, and Brian something else, some other people. So a bunch of experts from DWR, and I think who understand hydrology were there, and we were well received. And I got to tell you that my impression of Mr. Gutierrez is that he does understand the unique nature of our basin. He's one of the few people I talk to on the other side of the mountains that understands that we are a different creature and that we have different needs, and we're just different. Most people don't get that. He does, and so I felt like I was communicating well with him, and he understood what I was saying. His idea is that we're not going. DWR is not going to expect us to develop a GSP and to hand it to them in 2020, and for them to say no, that's not good enough. Go back. They don't want that to happen. So what their plan is to embed themselves in our process, to watch us work, kind of look over our shoulders, if you will, to look at the decisions we're making, and if the decisions we're making are going or not going in the direction that they deem as being appropriate. So my first takeaway with that was that all these committees and us here, we're not the power. The power in this whole organization, in this law, is the state. They're going to be the ones that have the ultimate say in what we do and how we do it. The best we can hope for is to fight for uniquely shaping our community. That's what we need. Whether or not we comply with this law is in the rearview mirror. It is how do we best take the tools the state has given us and implement them to our advantage. That's the fight. The fight is useless. When I talked to him, well, let me tell you one thing. We talked about how we're going to get to where we are, and he said, Mick, it looks to me like you have, you got to look at supply and demand. You got this much water coming in, and you're producing this much water over here. You have studies that are going to be underway to define that modeling, but regardless, you're in critical overdraft, and you're going to get to this point. And this point is defined as sustainment, whether it's up or down. It doesn't have to be perfectly steady. There'll be fluctuations in it, is my understanding of what he was talking about. But he said that point is defined as of January 1st, 2015. Not today, not tomorrow, not 2025 or 2040. The target date for us to balance or create the sustainment is modeled on January 1st, 2015. So as we go down in a glide slope of overdraft, the longer we wait to implement critical decisions and aggressively manage, the more difficult it's going to be for us to get up to where we need to be. And then he said to me, well, and something else, Mick, you need to be aware of is January 1st, 2015, you were in overdraft. So those numbers are going to be scrutinized. Those numbers are going to be evaluated to determine what the target is and how DWR is going to work with us to develop our plan. So I said to Mr. Gutierrez, we've been in overdraft for 60 years. we can't possibly achieve what you're implying that we need to achieve. And he looked and said, I said, we need to work with you to achieve, accommodations. We need to have something uniquely structured to our basin. And he nodded and he said, I understand what you're saying, Mick, but understand this. Kern County is the poster child for bad behavior. What he was saying was, he's going to work with us. But the allowances they give to us are going to be based on the fact, on the greater context of California, and that's what he said. He said Kern County is the poster child for Sigma. There's going to be heavy scrutiny on how we move forward in this whole world of Sigma. So I'm trying to set level of expectations. DWR is going to want short-term milestones. They're going to want interim achievements. They're going to want to see achievements quickly. They're going to want to see decisions made and implemented, but they've got to be based on science, and they've got to achieve specific, well-defined results. We just can't say, make this change over here without good science to justify that change we make is going to have a positive impact on our sustainment plan. He said, well, he goes, what are you doing now, Mick? I said, well, we're doing this. We've got some possible modeling concepts. We're looking at importing water. We're trying to do everything we can. We just looked at Fort Irwin and their water management, water treatment facilities, and we're doing everything we can to adjust, to manage the demand signal. We're going to get into demand signal, incentivizing behavior, solar impacts, that kind of stuff. But we're also looking at supply, and we got to do both. And he said, have you put in a moratorium for no new wells? I said, no. That would be devastating. I said, no, we haven't. He said, interesting. He said, have you put meters on wells? I said, no, we haven't. He goes, that's interesting. And then he went on about being and assuring me, and this is Mr. Gutierrez, who you've all met, that is firm in his resolve. And we can have words and we can shape things to our satisfaction, but we are going. The power is in the state of California. Next round of Prop 1 funding is 2017. We talked about, and that's $1 million for us. Maybe more if we can prove that we are moving in a positive direction and we're complying with all the wants of DWI. I guess that's it. But I did want to share with you, it's not pleasant, but I wanted to make sure, I'm your representative and you need to know and you need to understand, have a level of expectations that matches mine, and that's the best I can give you. Any other thoughts from any member of this board?
We have our job cut out for us.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And it's got to be based on science. That anecdotal analogies we use are critical components to get us to target an area, but we need facts, not anecdotes. The date and time of the next meeting is November 17th, 2016 at 10 a.m. There's no closed session today? So I need a motion to adjourn. We have a motion to adjourn. We're adjourned.